begin the Gemara today on Daf Pei Zayin Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom of the Amud. The Gemara is discussing the Mishnah here, where it speaks about a person that sends a child to go and pick up for him oil. He gave him money, and he also gave him a jug in his hands. And so the Mishnah says, a machlokes here, according to the Tana Kama, if the Chemveni, the storekeeper, sends back the oil in this jug and he sends back change and then it all broke and it got lost, it's the responsibility of the storekeeper for what happened. Rabbi Yehuda though says, no, it's not his responsibility. The father sent the child to go and bring him this oil, so I'm trusting what the father did here. He trusts the child to go and deliver the oil. So the Gemara explained that the machlokes here is, what is the father's intention? According to the Tana Kama, the Chachamim, the father's intention is to let the storekeeper know, I want you to send me oil, but you should send it with a responsible person, not send it back with the child. But according to Rabbi Yehuda, no, that the storekeeper is supposed to understand that the father is trusting the child to deliver the oil. So therefore it's not his responsibility. Okay, now what the Gemara is discussing is that in the end of the Mishnah it said that Chachamim will be made to Rabbi Yehuda, that the jug will not be the responsibility of the storekeeper, and that's bisman shat sloiches biyad hatinoik, if the jug stays in the hand of the child and the storekeeper pours the oil into his jug, so then it's not going to be the responsibility, if that jug breaks, it's not going to be the responsibility of the storekeeper. So the Gemara's question was, why not? If the point of the Chachamim's opinion is that the storekeeper should understand that he's supposed to send the oil back with a responsible adult and not with his child, what difference does it make if the storekeeper took that jug into his hands or the jug is still in the hand of the child? Either way, he wasn't supposed to send it back with his child. That's the Gemara's question. Okay, so the Gemara here is going to bring a few pshatim. So Elam, Abaye, Bar Ovim, V'Rab Chanina, Bar Ovim, the Omri Tarvayu, they both explain the pshat in our Mishnah. Hacha b'maya skinon, what is our Mishnah talking about? Kagain shenatla lamudba, that the storekeeper took this jug that the child brought and he took it in order to measure with it. He took it to use it to measure with it. Yeah, so in such a case, it becomes his responsibility what happens with this jug. Okay, the Rabbe, and as Rabbe said, the Omar Rabbe said, Hikisha, once, so this halacha of Hikisha here, it comes from the Gemara in Bava Basra, as Rashbam brings here, it talks over there about a zakim ve'ena lefi chvaydai. There's a person that's older and is a person that's not obligated to go and return a lost item. Okay, but the Rabbi says, Hikisha, if there's an animal that's lost, and this zaken that does not have responsibility to return it, but he goes and hits it and has it go in a certain direction, so then, once he already did that, nischayev ba. Whatever happens afterwards with this animal, if it runs away, it becomes the responsibility of this person that caused it to go. So similar, the Gemara wants to say, over here it's the same thing. When this child brought the jug to the storekeeper, so the Gemara already explained before, because he brought the jug to the storekeeper, so the father that gave the jug into his hands already took the risk that the child will be able to carry it. So if the storekeeper sends back the jug to the father, we're not going to blame the storekeeper for trusting the child with this. The father also trusted him with that. So then he'll be potted on the jug. That's why it says in the Mishnah that Chachamim Amayde, that if the jug remains in the hands of the child and the storekeeper sends it back, then if it breaks for the jug, he's going to be potted. However, if the storekeeper takes the jug out of the hands of the child and the storekeeper is using it for himself to measure the wine, instead of measuring how much wine or oil he's selling, to measure it in his own vessel, he uses this jug of the father to measure the wine, so then he took it to use for himself, and therefore it becomes his responsibility to make sure that this is returned safely to the owner, to the father. So therefore here, in such a case, you're going to be responsible. That's the distinction that the Mishnah is saying, according to the Chachamim. It depends on if it's still in the hands of the child, or the storekeeper already took it into his hands and was using it for himself, then it becomes his responsibility. Similar to what Rabbi here says, that the zaken ve'ena lefi chvaydai, he has no responsibility for this animal, but once he hits it and he does already interact with it, then it's going because of him, it does become his responsibility. But the Gemara asks on this, you can't compare that halacha of Rabbi to our case, because
why is the Chemveni potter?
The Chemveni is going to be potter if he didn't take it into his hands. The Mishnah says, according to the Chacham, the Gemara here is explaining according to the Chacham, if it's still in the hands of the child, if he did not take it into his hands, so he didn't use it, so then he's going to be potter. So, but the Gemara says, you can't compare it to what Rabbi said. When did Rabbi say that it becomes the responsibility of this person that hit the animal? The balechayim. That's only by animals. Because by hitting it, it takes steps going outward, meaning you're causing it to run away. So if you not only you interacted with it, you took it, but you actually cause it to go away. So then it's your responsibility to go and return it to its owner. But kihai gavna, here, just the fact that you took it into your hands from the child to measure in it, miyama. When did Rabbi never said such a thing, that in such a case, now it will become your responsibility to make sure that it's returned to the father safely. If the father took the risk of giving it to the child, that means that he trusts his child. So you can give it back to the child, to trust him, to give it back to the father. The fact that you just took it into your hands to measure, that's not enough of a reason to make you now responsible to give it back to the father safely. So the Gemara says another pshat. Elo Amar Rave. Rave said the pshat in our Mishnah is that ani va'arisha b'chabura, I and the lion amongst the group. Tirgmenua, we explained our Mishnah. Umanu, who's the lion amongst the group? Rab Zayda. This is Rab Zayda. That hacha b'maya skinon. What's the case here in our Mishnah? Kagan shenatla lamad bala acherim. If the storekeeper didn't just take it for himself to measure the oil in it that he needs for himself to measure in it for the business that he's doing for whatever he's selling, he took it to use to measure for others. So now over here, in such a case, he's not just using it to measure for what he's selling here, but he's using it for others. And so now, he wasn't allowed to do that. The father sent this jug to fill it up with wine to measure for him, but not to use for others. Now, what's the argument over here? He basically borrowed it to use for himself, for others, for the purpose of others, without permission. So the argument here is, in a case where a person borrows something and he's borrowing it without the permission of the owner, here the argument is, what are you called? What's the level of your responsibility? Mar savar shoyel have. So one opinion over here is that Rabbanan say that he's a shoyel. The Mar over here, I think, goes on again. It goes on Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that he's a shoyel, that he's just borrowing this. And in a case where a person borrows something, so if you borrowed something without permission, just like when you borrow with permission, what's your responsibility? You have to return it to the place that you took it from. So over here, he borrowed it without permission. He was using it to measure for others. But what's his responsibility as a person that borrows? To put a plaque to the place where he took it from. Where's the place that this chenveni took it from? From the child. So he gives it back to the child to return to the father. So when the child brings it back to the father and it breaks along the way, it's not going to be the chenveni's problem, because he already returned it to the child, which is the place where he took it from. However, the Chachamim hold gazlan have, that when you borrow something without permission, you're not just a borrower, you're a gazlan. And the halacha by a gazlan is, it's not enough to return it to the place that you took it from. You have to return it safely to the owner. And since you have to return it safely to the owner, now you can't give it back to the child to return to the father. And therefore, if you give it back to the child and it broke along the way, the storekeeper will be responsible. However, on that, the Mishnah said, though, that according to the Chachamim, if you never took it out of the hands of the child, and you just measured the wine or the oil into the hands of when the jug was in the hands of the child, so you never took it, you weren't a shel shalei das, you never took it for yourself to use to measure for others, you just poured the wine into that jug and the child brought it home and it broke along the way, it's not your responsibility that it broke along the way. The only time you'll be responsible is if you took it out of his hands and you were using it to measure for others, so according to the Chachamim, you become a gazlan. So therefore you have to give it back to the father himself. Now the Gemara goes back to a halacha that was mentioned before. This was mentioned before on Daf Peizayin, in one of the pshatim that the Gemara tried to explain our Mishnah. So the halacha that was mentioned was Amar Shmuel. Shmuel said, "Hanoitel kelim min ha'umal levakre." A person that takes a vessel from a craftsman in order to inspect it, to see if he wants to buy it. And while he's holding it in his hands, something happens, an oinus happens, it falls out of his hands, and it breaks. Chayiv, this person that was inspecting to buy this, will not be responsibility for what broke here. That was the halacha of Shmuel. So now the Gemara explains, V'hane mili, when are you going to be responsible? Who, the kitzi dome. That's if the price of this keli that you have in your hands was already set, or that it's already well known for everybody. Okay, so now, the Rashbam here brings more details about this halacha that it says here. This is a Gemara in Nedarim where it explains this more barichis. That this halacha is based on the idea that when the person comes to inspect to buy this, because he knows the price and not only knows the price, there's another detail to this also. This is a keli that you're taking, which is a high demand for it. Everybody's looking to buy this. So when this person that's inspecting it is taking it into his hands, as soon as he takes it into his hands, to some extent, he's already considered to be a buyer, that he bought it already. The seller is more than happy that he should take it. And you also take it into your hands, you're just inspecting it to see that there's no crack in it, that there's nothing wrong with it. As soon as you'll see that it's intact, you're going to want it, because this is something that everybody's looking to buy and the price is clear, the price is set. So therefore, the moment you take it into your hands, it's like you bought it already to some extent, and you have a responsibility now, if it breaks, to pay for it, to pay for. It's like you walk into a store. It's not like you walk into a store, but imagine you walk into a store, you take something off the shelf, and it cracks in your hands. Whose responsibility is that? So in that case, it's not like over here that it's like you already bought it, mamish, right? I'm not sure. Maybe over there you could compare when you take something off the shelf. The moment you took it off the shelf, so you're inspecting it just to see that it's fine, and you want to buy it already. And if it falls out of your hands and it breaks in the store, it should be your responsibility to pay for it. That's basically what Shmuel is saying over here. There's another pshat that the Rashbam brings, that you're not chayiv because it's as if you bought it already, but you're chayiv because it's as if you borrowed it. It's also considered to be like a shoyl, because you're taking it and you're inspecting it to see if you want it, and really the benefit is all yours. Meaning the seller over here is thinking, if you don't want it, give it right back to me. I'll sell it to someone else. There's other people that want it, and it's really to your benefit that the seller is allowing you to hold it in your hands and to inspect it, to buy it. He's giving you the opportunity to buy it. So you're having the hana of inspecting it and getting the opportunity to buy it. So that's like a shoyl, person that borrows, that takes something and has the benefit of using it. So therefore you'll be responsible. It's another pshat that Rashbam brings. Okay, now the Gemara brings a story in connection to this. Hahu Gavre, there was a person, the Olove Tapche. He came to a butcher. Agba atme the bisre. He picked up a atme the bisre, the thigh, a part of the animal, a piece of meat, and he's holding it in his hands, looking. He wanted to buy it, basically, like this case that Shmuel says. Now bahadi the ka'agba, as he's holding it in his hands, osa parsha mar miminei. This horse driver or this horseman came and grabs it out of his hands. So now who's responsible for this theft that just happened? So they came in front of Rav Yemer and so he was machayev, this person that picked up this piece of meat in the butcher shop, to pay for the loss here. Once you picked it up, so now whatever theft happens is your responsibility. That's only if there was a price, there was a clear price. You picked up a piece of meat and there was a label with a price, and once you pick it up, now if it breaks, or in this case someone steals it, you're going to be responsible for that. This is the halacha that Shmuel said. There was a person, the Isi Kori Lefum Nara. He brought Kori, which is gourds or pumpkins, to a place called Pumnara. So as he brought his pumpkins there, Asakula Alme, all the people around came, and Shokul Kara, and each one was grabbing another gourd here, a pumpkin. And this was something where the price was set. This was a season, it was high season, everybody was looking to get their pumpkins, and there was a price set for this. So now this person that brought all the pumpkins, he said, everybody's grabbing, he's not going to know who to collect the money from. So he screams and says, everything you took, I designated all for hectares. It's like this, everybody should just drop it, so they won't take it from him. So now Asla Kameh Rav Kahana, they came and asked Rav Kahana about this. So Amalahu, and Rav Kahana said that you can't designate something to be hektish if it's not yours. Right? Rashbam here brings the pasuk. It says Ish ki yaktish is beisa. It has to be something that's yours. So over here, these people that grab these gourds, because like the halacha of Shmuel, because it was an item which the price of it was set, and it's an item which is in high demand. The moment the buyer picks it up and the seller really wants people to buy it, it's like he bought it already. And whatever happens to it, it's the responsibility of the buyer. Elamai, this person was concerned that he won't know who to collect the money from, but really it's like the sale took effect already to some extent. And therefore, this person that brought these pumpkins cannot be makdash them anymore. The Gemara again spells out, when is this the case? If the price of these pumpkins was set. If it doesn't have a set price yet, then it's still considered to be in the possession of the owner of these pumpkins. And then he has the ability to be makdash this. And the Rashbam here adds, even though there's another Gemara that says, that a person can't be makdash something that's not in his possession. by a gazlan. If someone steals from you, the owner can't be makdish something because it's not only it has to be yours, that you have to own it has to be in your possession. So over here, seemingly these people took it and it's not in his possession anymore. But the Rashbam says they weren't stealing, they wanted to pay. So in such a case, when the price is not set and the sale is not in effect yet, they're holding it for the owner. They're not gazlanim. So in such a case, the owner would have the ability to be makdish them. And Abraisi we learned, yerek menashok. A person is going to the marketplace and he's buying vegetables. And now what is he doing? He's choosing vegetables and he puts them aside. The Bach adds another time, he's choosing more, but he's not yet sure exactly what he's going to buy. He's just choosing and putting aside vegetables. Even if he does this the entire day, he's not going to acquire these vegetables yet because he just picked them and put them aside, so he didn't acquire them yet. And therefore he's not going to be chayiv to give meiser. Why are we talking here about a chayiv meiser? So the case we're talking about over here is a person which is a chaver that buys from an Amma Oretz. This is the halacha of Demai. If you buy from a seller that's an Amma Oretz, which is a person that we suspect that he may not have separated the Maisers, when you buy from him, you have to separate the Maisers. So over here, in this case though, because you picked it and you put it aside and you didn't make up your mind to buy it yet, so you don't have to separate Maisers. However, if he already took it in his hands and in his heart, he made up his mind that he's going to buy it, and now, the moment he took it into his possession, and he's chayiv, so now he bought it there, or he has the mind to buy it, so therefore he becomes chayiv and meiser. And now what happens if he wants to change his mind? After he made up his mind to buy it, and the moment you buy it, you have an obligation to separate the meisters from this demai, but now you want to return it to its owner. So the Brisa says, you can't return it to the seller. Once you made up your mind, you're buying it, so now the chiyuv that you have to separate meisers from this produce applies. So you have to separate the meiser. But on the other hand, so what are you going to do? You're going to separate the meisers. That you also can't do, because the Bach here says, because then what's happening is you're returning to the owner this produce minus the 10% that you're taking off from meiser. So you can't take the meisers and then just return it to the owner. If you're not paying for it, how can you do that? So Hokkait said, what do you have to do? Maisroi, once you made up your mind to buy it, so now you have to separate the meiser. If you want to return the produce to the vegetable seller, you're going to have to give him back that produce, and you're going to have to pay him the money instead of the meisers that you had to separate from it. That's the halacha the Brisa says. So the Gemara asks on this, why is the halacha this way? Is it because a person made up his mind to buy something? Now he acquires it and he becomes obligated to give meiser, and he doesn't have an option to return it without separating the meiser. So the Rashbam explains, the Gemara's question is, even though we learned before that Shmuel said that once you have something in your hands and you made up your mind to buy it, and it's something that the price is set and everybody wants to buy it, that it's your responsibility for any aynus that happens while it's in your possession, now we can understand. While it's in your possession, you're going to be responsible for any aynus. But Shmuel never said that you don't have an option to return it. You still have an option to return it. So why can't you return it to the seller without giving the meisters? So the Gemara says, here we're talking about a person that's a Yerei Shamayim, he's God fearing, and Kagoin of Safra, as an example, like that of Safra, the Kim ben Avshei, or the Kaim ben Avshei, he fulfills regarding himself what the pasuk says, V'doiver emes b'vavai, that he speaks truth in his heart. Meaning, once the story with Rav Safra was that he was in the middle of davening, he was in the middle of Kriya Shema, and someone came to ask him if he can buy something from him. And he said a certain price that he's ready to pay. And Rav Safra didn't want to interrupt in the middle of Kriya Shema, so he didn't respond at all. So the person thought that Rav Safra is not ready to accept the price. So he offered a higher price and a higher price. And then when he finished saying Kriya Shema and he was able to respond, he wasn't ready to accept the higher price. Because already when he heard the price the first time, he was really ready to accept that price. So the fact that that person thought he didn't and he offered more money, Rav Safra was truthful that because in his heart he accepted the original price, he gave it to him for that original price. So similar over here, the Gemara is saying that when this person picked up these vegetables and he made up his mind to buy it, so therefore he goes by that he made up in his mind the first time. And if now he's planning on returning it, so then he's already chayiv meiser, you bought it already, and now you want to return it, you're going to have to pay the money for the meisters that you're going to have to separate. So Yirei Shemayim goes by what he made up before in his heart, and therefore he will have to pay that difference of the money of the meisters. Sagt der Heilige Mishnah, Hasitoin, a person which is a wholesaler. The Rashbam says the word sitoin is a Greek word which means wheat. So because this is a wholesaler that sells a lot of wheat, so he's called a sitoin. Mekaneach midaisav, so he has to clean out, has to wipe off his measuring cups that he uses, achad l'shloishim yom, once in 30 days. Okay, so we're talking very about these measuring cups that over time you use them, and there's liquid that you use them to measure in it. So if you don't clean it out once in 30 days, the liquid that's there gets congealed, and slowly the amount that you're measuring in it becomes less and less, so therefore you have to clean it out once in 30 days. A balabayis, which is a person that sells much less, so he has to clean it out echad l'shnei masachaydish. Once a year, it's enough to clean it out. Rav Shimon Gamliel says chiluf advarim. Note that it's the exact opposite. Chenvini mikanech midaisav pa'amayim b'Shabbos. A storekeeper, chenvini is a new concept. First, chiluf advarim. Rav Shimon Gamliel says that it's the opposite. When it comes to a sitain, because he's constantly using his measuring cup, so it doesn't congeal so quickly, because it's constantly in use, so you don't have to clean it out so often. When it comes to a balabayis that sells less often, so whatever you're measuring in it, the liquid remains inside untouched, and therefore it congeals quicker. So therefore, dafka the balabas is the one that has to clean it out once in 30 days. The storekeeper has to clean out his measuring cups pamayim b'Shabbos, twice a week. Okay, so the Rashbam over here, in the first pshat that the Rashbam brings is because he's using it so often, so therefore he has to clean it out more often. According to what the Tanna Kama says, that the more often you use it, the more it's necessary to clean it out. That's one pshat that Rashbam brings. Another pshat that Rashbam brings is that by the Chenveni, the reason why he has to clean it out more often is, and this is even according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, it's based on what we learned in one of the Mishnahs before, that when you are selling something that you measured inside of it wine or oil, so a regular person that sells, after you pour it out, you have to make sure that the 3 drops that drop out of it in order to clear out what you measured. But by a storekeeper, because he has a lot of customers, Chachamim did not obligate him to do that. So therefore, there's more that's going to be left inside this measuring cup. So therefore, he has to clear it out more often. He has to wipe it out and clear it out more often. And also the mishkalais, the weights that are used to weigh, you have to clean them and wipe them off once a week. I'll call mishkal and mishkal. And when you have the miznayim, a scale, which has the cups or the vessels on each side of the scale, that you have to clean out every time. You're weighing something inside of it, you have to clean it out. Now, regarding cleaning out over here, the weights or the scale, Rab Shimon Gamliel explains, when is this? If you're weighing things that are moist and are wet, and therefore it gets attached to the weights or to the miznayim, to the scale. I will be yavish. If you're only weighing things that are dry, ain't it tzarech. Then it's not necessary to clean it off and to wipe it off, because it doesn't get attached to the weights. Another halacha here regarding when you're selling and you're weighing with a scale, the chayev lachrialoi tefach. When you weigh, and so the way you weigh is, so you have the 2 sides of the weights. That's what we're talking about over here. So when, for example, one side of the weight, there's a certain weight to it, and then let's say it's a pound. And then when you're selling something else, it's a pound. And when they're exactly equal on the 2 sides of the scale, so you know that you're selling a pound. So you're supposed to be machriya. You're supposed to allow what you're selling to weigh down a little bit more, so you give them extra when you're selling it. And how much is that? A tefach. You allow it to weigh down a tefach. And now the Gemara will explain what this means. It doesn't mean that you always have to give him extra tefach. As we'll see in the Gemara, there's a certain amount of extra, a little bit extra you have to give him in order. If you give exact, so then it could be not exact. So you always have to be machriya. You give, when you sell, you have to give a tiny drop of an extra, that it should be machriya, more than what the weight is. If when you're weighing exact and you're not allowing the scale to go down a little extra to give him extra, then girumin, you have to give him girumin. The word girumin literally means you have to tilt it in the favor of the buyer. So even if you're not actually putting on the weights that are on the scale, that it should weigh down, but before, you have to give the buyer, you have to give him a little bit extra to tilt it in his favor. Now, how much you have to give him extra? Echad la'asara balach, a tenth. when it comes to things that are lach, when you're selling wine or oil or things like that, it's not echad la'asara, as we'll see in the Gemara. It doesn't mean you have to add a tenth to every sale that you give. It's much less than that. It's really 1/100th. We'll see, the Gemara will explain. And the echad la'esrim biyavish. And when it comes to yavesh, when you're selling dry things, so there you give a 20th. The Gemara will explain what that means. It's also not a 20th, it's much less than that. Okay, now another halacha, makim shenogu lamod b'daka. In a place where what's measured, the way you measure is in a small measuring cup. So la yomid begasa. You shouldn't, if the minig is to use a small measuring cup, don't use a large measuring cup. Begasa, if you use a large measuring cup, la yomid bedaka. Do not measure in a small measuring cup. It comes out, the measuring comes out different, and because when you measure in a small one and in a large one, how much is left over inside, and also, so you should use the exact measuring cup, which is the minig there. Now another thing regarding the minig, limchoik, if the minig is that when you measure, so you make it exact, meaning that you smooth it out, right? So then lo yigdosh. So then you don't measure it with a heaping measurement. Ligdosh, if it's a place where the minig is that it should be heaping, then lo yimchoik. Then you shouldn't smooth it out. Okay, so the Gemara begins here with the halacha that the Mishnah said that when you're measuring on a scale, so then you should allow a little bit extra. You should give a little more. It shouldn't be exact. What's the source of this? What's the source of this halacha? Amar Reish Lakish. So Reish Lakish said, the pasuk says regarding measuring, even shleima v'tzedek, that you should have the stone that you use for measuring should be whole. And then it's a tzedek. It should be justice, or right, the right size. Why does it add the word tzedek after it says shlema? What this means is tzedek mishlcha v'tenla. You should give him extra. That's what it means. It's not just enough that you're giving him exact, but you should give him a little extra as well. So the Gemara asks in this, if we're learning it from a pasuk, that you have to actually give extra when you weigh, ihachi, if so, what does the Mishnah say right afterwards? That that if you are weighing and measuring to give exact, so then nice and like girumin. So then later on you have to give him a little bit more to tilt in favor of the buyer. But if you're saying that when you measure, you're supposed to allow the scale to go down a little extra, and this is learned from a pasuk, it's minatayre, so how does it say that this person is measuring exact? You're not allowed to measure exact. The pasuk says tzedek, that you have to give him a little extra when you weigh. So the Gemara explains, this is not based on a pasuk really. Elo reishe b'mokim shenagu. The halacha of the reishe, where it says that you allow the scale to go down a drop extra, if that's the minig in the place. You have to follow the way the minig is. That's the first halacha of the Mishnah. And then when Reish Lakish says that he learns out from a pasuk that Evan Shleima v'tzedek aseifa, that refers to the seifa of the Mishnah, aseifa itmer. And that is hayushoikoloi ayin ba'ayin. That if you're weighing exact, because the minig in this place is not to weigh that it should weigh down a little more. Then Naisan Lagirumin. Then the pasuk is saying, because you weighed exact, so you don't know, when you do exact, you don't know if it's exact. So over here the pasuk is saying, tilt it in favor of the buyer and give him a little bit extra. That's what you learn out from the pasuk. And on this, Menon Emili, Omer Reish Lakish, Damakra, V'tzedek, that it's a Evan Shleimo V'tzedek, Tzedek Mishulcha, V'tenloi, and you have to give him a little bit extra. Okay, so now the Gemara explains, what is that little extra you have to give him? In our Mishnah, it said that the shiur is echad la'asara balach. If you just read the words of the Mishnah, it sounds like it's saying you have to give him a tenth, which is really a lot. Yeah, every time you sell, you have to give an extra tenth. So the Gemara explains the kama girum, and how much extra do you have to give that it should be tilted in favor of the buyer. If you're selling 10 litra belach regarding liquids, that's again. Let me read that again. Omer Abba Bamamal Omer Rav Echad me'asara belitra belach la'asara litrin. This is 1/10 of a litra when you're selling 10 litra. So that really means that 1/100th. That's what it means, right? Because again, if it's 10 litra, so then you're giving a tenth of a litra. So it comes out to be 100. So it's really just a little bit that you have to add an extra, that it should be clear that it's not, shouldn't be exact. Okay, now here the Gemara brings the actual lashon of the Mishnah. It said, "Echad la'asara balach, ve'echad la'esrin b'yavish v'chulu." The Gemara will explain what the meaning of the Mishnah is regarding yavish. But just a second to explain what the Rashbam says over here. The way the Gemara understands the lashon of the Mishnah, even though the Mishnah said "Echad la'asara balach," it sounds like the Mishnah is saying that it's a tenth. But the Rashbam says that the Mishnah was mekatze. It's really missing a word in the Mishnah. It's like the Mishnah would have said "Echad me'asara le'asara balach." The Mishnah didn't want to repeat the two words mei asara, le asara. So, but that's really what the Mishnah means, that it's 1/10 for 10 litra. Okay, but then what did it say regarding when you're selling something which is not liquid, something which is dry, yavesh? There it said echad le'esrim biyavesh, which also means the same thing. It means echad le'esrim. It means a 20th for. That doesn't mean a 20th for what you're selling. But here the Gemara will explain. Ibaya lahu. So on this the Ibaya was asked, how do we understand what the Mishnah is saying here? Hey chikama. What does the Mishnah mean? Does that mean echad me'asara belach? Does the Mishnah mean to say that you have to give a 10th for when it's liquid, la asara delach, when you're selling 10 litra of liquid? So then you give a 10th, which comes out to be a 100th of that. And then when it comes to something which is yavesh, ve'echad me'esrim biyavesh, le'esrim biyavesh, if you're selling 20 litra of yavesh, so then you give a 20th of that, right? So then that actually comes out to be, I think, a 400th. I think that's what it is. When you're selling 20, amount of 20, and you're giving a 1/20th that you're adding to it. Is that what the Mishnah means to say? Just like when the Mishnah said regarding liquid, and it speaks about 10, and it says that you're giving a 10th for 10, so too when it speaks about yavesh, and it speaks about selling the amount of 20, so what it means to say is that you have to give a 20th of that amount when you're selling 20. Or maybe the way to understand the Mishnah is echad me asara la asara delach. You give a 10th for when you're selling 20 by liquid, ula esrim yavesh. And when you sell 20 by yavesh, so then you also give the same 10th, but you give a 10th for 20 of yavesh, which comes out, I believe, to be a 200th of a 200th of what you're selling. So it's the question over here is regarding yavesh. Is it is it a 200th or 400th of what you're selling that you have to add? The reason why when it comes to yavesh you're adding less than lach is simple, based on what we learned before, because by lach, when you're pouring it out, there's more that remains with the seller. It doesn't all come out. By yavesh, whatever you're giving, none of it remains by the seller. So therefore, over there, when you have to give a little extra, you have to give much less, because it doesn't remain with the seller. Okay, now here the Gemara brings an agadite regarding making sure that when you sell, you should sell fairly and rightly and weigh it properly. Amar Rab Levi says, Kosha einshan shel midis, the punishment of a person that weighs and then measures and it's not honest. So the punishment for this is Yaisem Einshan shel Arayis, is even worse than the punishment that there is for the Isser of Arayis. Shezeh Nema Behen. Over here, when it comes to Arayis, the lashon of the pasuk is ale. It uses the lashon of the pasuk is as ki es kol hatoyeves ha'el. All of these abominable acts. So it uses the term ale. And v'zeh, when it comes to midais, it says nema behen ele. The lashon of the pasuk is ki tayavas Hashem lekecha koloise ele. Uses the same term of abominable tayavas, and it uses the term ele with the added hey. So therefore, this is worse. Now, my mashma the high ale koshuhu. How do we know that the word ale means not just this, but it means something which is harsh and something which is a bad punishment, a harsh punishment? And the strong ones from the land he took. So the word ele means a strong punishment. So the Gemara asks, Gabi Arayis Nami. There's another pasuk by the Isser of Arayis, Aksiv, and there it says, ele. There's another pasuk, so even by Arayis it also uses the term ele. So the Gemara answers, Ahul umute midis mikaris. Over there, it uses the word Eila by Arayis as an exclusion, to say that only by the Isser of Arayis is there the Einish of Kodesh, but by the Isser of selling with measurements and weights that are not honest, there's no Isser of Kodesh. So the Gemara asks, so then that means that by Arayis it's a harsher punishment. So then why are you saying that it's a harsher punishment for someone that sells with not honest weights? Answers the Gemara, the reason why it's harsher here, because the Hasam Efshir B'tshuva, a person that is over on the Isser of Arayis, it's possible to do tshuva for this. But V'hacha over here, in this case, when you sell to people and you're not using honest weights, La Yefshir B'tshuva, how are you going to do tshuva? You have all these customers that bought and you don't know who it is now that you have to return to the money to. So you can't, so it's harder to do tshuva. The Rashbam brings, it does say in the Gemara, in Bava Basra and other places, that what you do is you have to take an amount of money that you stole from the public by measuring that honestly, and you dedicate it to the public to be used to something. But you can't really do a full tshuva by returning to each individual that you stole from. So therefore you end up getting punished harsher for this. Rab Levi said a similar, connected to this halacha here, or to this concept here, Koshe Gezel Hedyet. It's worse when you steal from a plain person, Yosef Migezel Gavaya, more than stealing from the Beis Hamikdash, from Hektish. And you see this in the pasuk because shazeh hiktim chet lemeila. In the pasuk, when it speaks about stealing from a plain individual, in the lashon of the pasuk, it says the term chet, that it's a sin, before it uses the term meila. So that shows that it's something which is harsher. It says over there, it says the pasuk nefesh ki sechta u'malov. But in the pasuk of meila, it first uses the term meila and then the term chet ki simuel mal v'chata. So that's not as harsh. And I think the Mashayar explains the reason is because when you steal from Hektish, even though you stole from Hektish, but wherever it is, it's still in the possession of Hektish. So therefore, it's not really fully stealing it. When you steal from another individual, though, whatever you steal is fully stolen from him. So therefore, it's worse. Another thing Rab Levi said, hey, come and see that the midah of the Eibishter, the character of the Eibishter, is not like the character of a human being. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when it comes to the Eibishter himself, Berech Yisrael, when he benches Yidden, this is in Parshas Bechukaisai, when the Eibishter benches Yidden, in Bechukaisai Telechu and so on, so there the bracha is Be'esrim Ushtayim. He benches Yidden with all 22 letters of the Aleph base. And the Kololon, and then in the klalas that there are in Parshas Bechukaisai, it's only B'shmaina. It's only with 8 of the letters of the Aleph base. And the Gemara explains, the bracha of the Eibishter in Bechukaisai is with all 22 letters of the Aleph base because it begins Me'im Bechukaisai. It starts from Im Bechukaisai, which is with an Aleph, ad Kaimimius. And the last word of the bracha of Bechukaisai is the word Kaimimius, which finishes with a Taf. So this is all the brachas from Aleph to Taf. The Kalola Mishmaina, but he curses them only with 8 of the letters of the Aleph base because it begins with Mi Ve'im Bechukaisai. It begins with the letter Vav, Im Bechukaisai Temasu, Ad Ves Chukaisai Galo Nafsham, which it ends with a Mem, so it's only from the Vav till the Mem, that's only 8 of the letters of the Aleph base. That's by the Eibishter, in Parshas Bechukaisai. V'ilu Moshe Rabbeinu, but when it comes by Moshe Rabbeinu in our Parsha, in Parshas Kisavai, which is Moshe Rabbeinu, Mishnah Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu said, Mepiatzmai. So over here, Baruch Mishmaina, here it's the opposite. When he benches them, it's only with 8 letters of the Aleph base, and the Kol Vesrim V'Shtayim. And he curses them, it's with all 22 letters of the Aleph base. And the Gemara says, how do you see this? Because Baruch Mishmaina, he benches them only with 8 letters, because how does it begin? V'Vehaya Im Shemaya Tishma, so it begins with the letter Vav. Ad La'avdam, and it concludes with the word La'avdam, which is with a Mem. So from Vav to Mem is 8 letters. And v'kololom v'esrim v'shtayim, but he curses them with 22 letters, and that's mivahaya im loisishma. It begins with the letter vav, but how does it conclude? Ad v'en kaina, and the en kaina finishes with a hey, meaning that it starts with the vav. You go all around the whole aleph base, and you come back to the hey. So that's all 22 letters of the aleph base. Okay, so but it's known what it says when you get to the Teichacha of this week's parsha, when the Mittel Rebbe heard the Teichacha when a time when the Alter Rebbe wasn't there, and he got so sick from hearing the Teichacha. And he asked him what happened every year he didn't get this sick. So he said, when my father reads, I hear only brachas. So Moshe Rabbeinu, when the Teichacha is all 22 letters of the Aleph base, it's really even higher letters of brachas that he's giving Yidden.